Welcome to AP Chem's 5th lab of the year. This is the hydrogen peroxide lab where your objective will be to determine the percentage of hydrogen peroxide in a drugstore bottle. To do this, we will be using the technique of redox titration. The theory is that by reacting a solution of known volume and concentration with a known volume of a solution of unknown concentration, you'll be able to use stoichiometry to determine the unknown concentration. In this lab, the solution of known volume and concentration will be a purple potassium permanganate solution, and the solution of known volume and unknown concentration will be the hydrogen peroxide. Obtain around 75 milliliters of potassium permanganate solution in a beaker. Make sure to record the concentration of this solution. Set up the burette on the ring stand and place a waste beaker underneath. When the stopcock is vertical, the solution flows out. When the stopcock is horizontal, it stops. Rinse the burette once with around 5 milliliters of distilled water, emptying into the waste beaker. Rinse twice with around 5 milliliters potassium permanganate. Fill the burette with potassium permanganate above the 0 mark. Let some excess run out of the burette until the solution falls below the 0 mark to eliminate bubbles in the tip. Close the stopcock and remove the waste beaker. Meanwhile, set up the reaction solution in a 125 milliliters Erlenmeyer flask. Use a disposable pipette to add exactly 1 milliliters of the hydrogen peroxide into the flask. Record the actual concentration of hydrogen peroxide on the label of the bottle for later use in error analysis. Add around 25 milliliters of distilled water to increase the volume of solution in the flask. Add 5 milliliters of 6 molar sulfuric acid. Be careful, it is concentrated. If it gets on your hands, wash it off. If it gets itchy, let Dr. Carell know so that he can get something to neutralize it. Place the Erlenmeyer flask below the burette and place a sheet of white paper underneath to help detect color changes. Before you begin, record the initial volume of the potassium permanganate solution in the burette. Initially, you can let around 8 milliliters of potassium permanganate run into the reaction flask, swirling to mix. You'll see the solution turn pink when the drops hit, then change to colorless. Use a wash bottle to rinse down any potassium permanganate on the sides of the flask. After the initial 8 milliliters, slow down the stream to 1 drop at a time. Continue to rinse the sides of the flask as necessary. As it starts to take longer for the solution to turn colorless, slow down the drops even more. Stop when a single drop turns the solution pink. Record the final volume of potassium permanganate. You will perform a total of 3 trials, so do not pour out the remaining potassium permanganate in the burette. Depending on how much potassium permanganate you needed in the first trial, you may or may not need to add more to the burette. For each of the trials, subtract the initial volume of potassium permanganate from the final. Average these values and use stoichiometry to determine the concentration of hydrogen peroxide.